Respected viewers, there was a time when the world believed beauty could freeze a moment forever. Cameras flashed, runways trembled, and millions of people watched in awe as women who seemed almost mythical walked through the bright white lights of fashion's most powerful stages. They were called supermodels, untouchable, timeless, perfect. But behind the glossy magazine covers and the dazzling smiles was a truth the world never wanted to face. Because time eventually reaches everyone, even the faces that once defined beauty itself. For decades, the fashion industry created a dream so powerful that it almost felt eternal. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, a small group of women rose above every other model in the world. Their names were whispered in boardrooms, celebrated in magazines, and screamed by fans outside fashion shows. Women like Naomi Campbell, Linda Evangelista, and Cindy Crawford were not simply models. They were cultural icons. Designers fought over them. Photographers built their careers capturing them. And the public believed they represented a kind of beauty that could never fade. But the truth about fame is something the cameras rarely show. Because behind the applause, behind the glamorous parties and the private jets, there was an invisible pressure that slowly began to reshape their lives in ways few outsiders could understand. Many of these women entered the industry when they were teenagers. They were told that their faces were their fortune and their youth was their power. The fashion world moved at a terrifying speed. One year, you were the most photographed woman on earth, and the next, someone younger, someone newer, someone fresher appeared. For some models, the transition from global obsession to quiet disappearance happened almost overnight, and when the spotlight fades, it can leave scars. Few stories capture this painful transformation, on more than that of Linda Evangelista. In the 1990s, she was known for a sentence that became legendary in fashion history. She once said she didn't wake up for less than $10,000 a day. At the time, the statement wasn't arrogance, it was reality. Designers like Gianni Versace and photographers like Steven Meisel considered her face one of the most powerful in fashion. Her sharp cheekbones and piercing gaze defined an entire generation of beauty. But decades later, something happened that shocked even the most loyal fans. For years, Linda vanished from the public eye. The woman who once appeared on hundreds of magazine covers simply disappeared. Rumors began spreading quietly through fashion circles. Some whispered about illness. Others speculated about personal tragedy. The truth was something far more complicated. Behind closed doors, Linda was battling the emotional consequences of a cosmetic procedure that she believed would help her maintain the career that had defined her life. Instead, according to her own heartbreaking confession, the treatment left her feeling disfigured and emotionally shattered. For nearly 5 years, she hid from the world. Friends say she avoided mirrors. She refused interviews. And the woman who once commanded the runway now struggled with a quiet grief few people understood. But Linda was not the only legendary model whose appearance changed in ways that shocked the public. There was also the story of Janice Dickinson. In the 1970s and 80s, Janice was known as one of the most fearless personalities in fashion. She was bold, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. Some even called her the world's first supermodel long before the term became popular. She partied with rock stars. She appeared alongside actors like Jack Nicholson and musicians such as Mick Jagger. Her life seemed like an endless celebration of glamour and rebellion. But the same fearless spirit that made Janice famous also led her down darker paths. Years later, she would openly talk about addiction. emotional breakdowns, and the overwhelming pressure of trying to stay young in an industry that worships youth above everything else. As time passed, Janice's appearance changed dramatically, sparking endless headlines and cruel comments online. Critics mocked her transformation. Tabloids compared old photos to new ones with brutal captions. What many people never realized was that behind those changes was a woman carrying decades of emotional weight. The fashion industry rarely talks about what happens after the spotlight fades. Because once the cameras move on, the silence can be deafening. Even someone as powerful and respected as Naomi Campbell has spoken about the hidden cost of living under constant scrutiny. Naomi remains one of the most recognizable faces in fashion history, still walking runways long after many of her contemporaries retired. But even she has admitted that the pressure of maintaining perfection can be exhausting. Imagine living in a world where every wrinkle becomes a headline, every photograph becomes a comparison to the past. Every public appearance invites millions of strangers to judge how much you have changed. For many former models, this pressure created a painful identity crisis. Because when your entire career is built on how you look, what happens when the mirror begins to tell a different story? Some tried to reinvent themselves, others quietly stepped away, and a few experienced something far more heartbreaking. Friends of several retired models have revealed that the emotional aftermath of leaving the spotlight can be overwhelming. The world that once celebrated them moves forward without warning. Invitations stop arriving. Phones stop ringing. The applause fades. And suddenly, the women who once ruled the fashion world are forced to confront a painful question. Who am I, if I am no longer the face everyone remembers? In recent years, fans have been stunned by viral photos showing how dramatically some of these legendary models have changed. Social media can be ruthless. Images spread within seconds, often accompanied by cruel commentary. People forget that the faces they are judging belong to real human beings, women who spent decades giving the world beauty, glamour, and inspiration. Behind many of those changes are stories the public never sees. Health struggles, private grief, family tragedies, and sometimes the emotional toll of chasing an impossible standard for far too long. In quiet interviews and deeply personal confessions, several former supermodels have begun revealing the truth about what really happens after the runway lights fade. Some describe feeling invisible. Others speak about loneliness and the strange sadness of watching younger versions of themselves live forever in old photographs. The world remembers them as timeless, but they know time never stopped. And in some cases, the transformation became so shocking that even their closest fans barely recognized them. Yet the most painful stories are only beginning to surface. Because behind the headlines about changing faces and shocking transformations lies something much deeper, a hidden history of regret, pressure, and personal battles that the fashion industry kept buried for decades. And as more of these legendary women finally begin to speak openly about their experiences, the truth about what really happened to some of the world's most famous models is slowly coming into the light. A truth that is far more emotional and far more haunting than anyone expected. Type continue when you're ready for the next part. Continue, beloved viewers. There is a moment that quietly arrives in every model's life, a moment the cameras never capture. It happens long after. The applause fades, after the photographers lower their lenses, after the magazines replace yesterday's icons with tomorrow's faces. Tomorrow's faces. It's the moment when a woman who once defined beauty suddenly realizes the world remembers her younger self more clearly than it remembers her today. For someone like Tyra Banks, that realization arrived in a way few people could have predicted. In the 1990s, Tyra was everywhere. She was one of the first black supermodels to dominate both the fashion world and mainstream television. Her appearances on the runway were powerful, confident, almost electric. Designers admired her presence, photographers loved the way she controlled every frame, and the public embraced her charm. She appeared alongside legends like Heidi Klum and Claudia Schiffer during the golden era of fashion shows. Back then, these women weren't just models. They were symbols of an industry that believed beauty could conquer the world. But fame has a strange way of reshaping identity. Tyra eventually stepped away from the runway and reinvented herself as a television personality, creating the hugely successful show America's Next Top Model. Millions of viewers watched as young hopefuls competed for a chance to follow the path she had once walked. To the outside world, it looked like a perfect transition. But in interviews years later, Tyra quietly revealed that the pressure never truly disappeared. Every time she appeared on television, the internet compared her face to old magazine covers. Comments about weight, aging, and appearance flooded social media. Some viewers celebrated her evolution, but others were far less kind. In one emotional confession, Tyra admitted that public scrutiny about her changing body deeply affected her confidence. The same world that once praised her beauty suddenly dissected every detail of her appearance. And she was not alone. Another face that once defined global beauty was Carla Bruni. Before becoming the wife of Nicolas Sarkozy and stepping into the key role of France's First Lady, Carla was one of the most photographed models in Europe. Her elegant features and calm presence made her a favorite of designers like Karl Lagerfeld. Fashion magazines adored her quiet sophistication, and her life seemed almost like a fairy tale. But time slowly began changing the image the public remembered. When Carla appeared at public events years later, critics began whispering about cosmetic procedures and dramatic changes in her face. Photos spread across the internet, comparing her youthful runway images to her later public appearances. For Carla, those comparisons became deeply painful. In rare interviews, she admitted that the pressure to remain beautiful in the public eye can make even the most confident women question themselves. Because in the world of fashion,